Hello, friends. Thank you for being here. Each of you makes this channel alive and special. Thanks to your support, I can share stories, thoughts, and emotions that hopefully resonate in your heart. If you have just started exploring my content, welcome. Real-life stories are waiting for you here. Subscribe, like, and share your impressions. Your voice is very important to me. So, here's the story. My son-in-law, who I've pretty much always thought of as my own son, pulled a sneaky move one night. He slipped out of the house quietly, carrying a briefcase. His weird behavior recently had me a bit worried, so I decided to play detective. I followed him without him noticing. He bolted to the river and tossed the briefcase straight into the murky water, then ran off like he was being chased. I didn't let it slide. I jumped in, grabbed that briefcase, and when I opened it, my heart almost stopped. Trust me, what I saw inside was jaw-dropping. But hang on a second. Before I fill you in on what happened next, why don't you subscribe to my channel and drop a comment with the current time where you're watching? Now picture this. It's February, and the cold air felt like it was slicing right through my coat as I walked up the steps to my porch. I'd just clocked out at the legal clinic around 3:30, feeling pretty pumped because we'd made some headway on the Martinez family's housing discrimination case. It was looking promising. I stuck my key in the door, thankful for the familiar warmth of my home that I've called mine for the last 37 years. As I hung up my coat and headed down the hall, my brain was already on the legal brief I wanted to review before dinner. That's when I noticed something wasn't quite right. The study door was slightly ajar. Now I always make sure to close it, every single time. Instinctively, I grabbed the doorframe. The old prosecutor in me kicked into gear. Something felt seriously off. I took a deep breath and slowly swung the door open. Papers were scattered across my desk, like a mini tornado had hit. Drawers were open with their stuff strewn all over the Persian rug my late wife had handpicked. The picture of my dad, the one from his army days in 1943, was hanging crookedly. But what made my stomach do a somersault was the bookshelf. It had been moved to the side, and there it was, the safe, left open as if screaming. I didn't rush over to the safe right away. I paced the room, examining everything like I did with crime scenes in my career. No broken glass, no muddy footprints. The windows were securely shut. Whoever did this had calmly walked straight through the front door. When I finally checked the safe, it was practically empty. My father's Rolex Submariner, his big buy with that fat paycheck back in '62, gone. The appraiser said it was worth $18,000. My grandfather's engraved silver cigarette case had vanished too, and the cash I'd put aside for my quarterly taxes, $8,500, was nowhere to be found. I ran my fingers over the safe's combination dial. No scratches, no forced entry. It was opened using the combination. Only 3 of us knew those numbers: me, my daughter Evelyn, and her husband Austin. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me standing there, feeling how deep betrayal could cut. I turned on my heels and walked to the living room. The TV was blasting some cooking show with an overly enthusiastic host. Austin was sprawled out on my couch, with his feet up on my coffee table, wearing the same rumpled shirt from that morning. Evelyn was huddled in the armchair, biting her thumbnail, looking lost in her thoughts. Neither of them even glanced my way when I walked in. I stood there, not saying a word for a few moments. Austin laughed at whatever was on TV. Evelyn stayed focused on her hands. Finally, I broke the silence. "Did either of you go into my study today?" I asked, keeping my voice steady and professional, like back in the courtroom. Austin turned to me quickly. "What?" "No. Why?" he responded. "Someone got into my safe," I explained, not taking my eyes off Evelyn. "My father's watch is missing, the cash for my taxes, the cigarette case." Evelyn's face went pale and she avoided eye contact. Alarmed, Austin jumped up from the couch. "Are you serious? Someone robbed you? When? We've been here all day, we would have heard something." "Would you?" I asked, now looking at Austin. Evelyn tried to say something, but her words failed. her hands trembling. I don't know anything about it, Dad. Austin's voice grew more agitated. Are you seriously asking us if we did it? After everything we've done to help you out after Mom's death? I let the silence hang there. After working in prosecution for years, I knew that guilty people often rush to fill silence with words, while the innocent don't mind it. This is unbelievable, Austin exclaimed, throwing his hands up. After everything, and you think we took your stuff? I haven't accused anyone yet, I replied calmly. I only asked a question. Nope, that's a firm no. Austin was striding back and forth, looking stressed out. Victor, maybe you've just misplaced them. You know you're not exactly getting younger. Getting older can mess with your memory sometimes. Have you tried checking the other drawers? Maybe you tucked them away somewhere and just don't remember. That felt like a jab. Yeah, I was 63, but still sharp as ever. There hadn't been any foul play with the safe. It was opened with the combination. Austin stopped his back and forth. There was something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or he was deep in thought. Look, it's not us, he said. Maybe someone saw you use the combination, or maybe you scribbled it down and someone came across it. I hadn't done that. Well, I don't know what else to say, he blurted out, sounding kind of hopeless. We didn't do it. Why would we? This is our home, thanks to you. I headed to the kitchen phone, keeping a watchful eye on the both of them. Evelyn was quietly sobbing, tears rolling down her cheeks. Austin was watching me, looking as if he was cornered. I dialed 911 and waited on the line. Yes, I need to report a theft. Some valuables are missing from my safe and there's no forced entry. Go ahead, call them, Austin yelled. We've got nothing to hide. They'll find we didn't do anything. I gave my address to the operator and answered her questions, coolly and calmly, like I was back testifying in court. Meanwhile, Austin went pale and sat down heavily, while Evelyn buried her face in her hands. They're sending someone over, I said after hanging up. We'll just wait. The next hour was a long, awkward silence. Austin blankly stared at the TV screen while Evelyn stayed glued to her chair. I busied myself at the kitchen table, jotting down all that was missing along with their estimated values and noting the last time I saw each item. Old habits die hard, being thorough, establishing timelines, letting evidence paint its own picture. When I glanced up, Evelyn was watching me from the living room, her eyes all tired and red. She quickly looked away when our gazes met. The doorbell finally rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Detective Mark Caldwell walked in, eyes heavy and weary, moving purposefully like nothing could surprise him anymore. Couldn't have been more than 50, but he wore an old man's burden beneath his wool coat. I led him to my study, where he paused at the doorway, observing everything much like I used to size up crime scenes. No forced entry, he mentioned, more as a statement than a question. None that I found, I confirmed. He took out a notepad, snapped some photos on his phone, then crouched next to the safe with a flashlight. No scratches on the combination lock, no damage to the frame. Whoever did this knew the combination, he said. Only my daughter and her husband know it besides me. His face didn't change, unreadable. I'll need to interview them separately. Is that all right? Of course. Caldwell dusted the safe for fingerprints while I gave my statement in the kitchen, recounting the facts. What was missing, their worth, and the timeline of when I left for the clinic and when I got back. I mentioned the combination was only known to us three, but didn't speculate further. That was his job. Caldwell called Austin in first while I hovered in the hallway, close enough to catch a snippet. Austin's voice floated out, sincere and wounded. Detective, I can't believe this happened in our home. Victor's been so good to us, especially after I lost my job. Who'd do such a thing? How long have you been living here, Mr. Carlton? Almost 2 years, since November 2023. And you were home all day yesterday? Yes, both of us were here. Evelyn was working on her laptop upstairs, and I was downstairs watching TV, filling out job applications online. "Did you hear or see anything unusual?" Austin replied. "Nothing, but the study is at the back, so if someone slipped in through a window or something, we might not have noticed." There was a pause. "Could someone have watched Victor open the safe, maybe from a window?" "The safe is behind a bookshelf," Caldwell said evenly. "You'd have to move the shelf to open it." "Right. I just thought maybe someone who used to work here, like a cleaner or a contractor, might have known." Austin's voice had this edge of desperation that made my skin crawl. When it was Evelyn's turn for questions, she barely got any words out, just nodding or shaking her head through tears. She kept repeating that she was absolutely clueless. She'd been hiding in her room all day, unable to figure out why anyone would do such a thing. Caldwell's questions never let up, but he was gentle about it. Did she notice anything strange? Any new faces around the house lately? Had she any idea when her dad last opened the safe? She just kept murmuring, "I don't know. I just can't. I'm sorry." Once Caldwell wrapped up dusting for fingerprints, he showed me the results. Only mine were on the safe's dial and handle. Whoever did this either wore gloves or made sure to clean up after themselves. The study looked like a tornado had hit it, and it felt off. Caldwell, ever the pro, packed his things efficiently. He said, "Mr. Bennett, I'll get this report done tonight and alert the local pawn shops. Keep an eye on the internet for your stuff. Sometimes thieves try selling online." He looked at me seriously. "I have to be honest. With no hard proof or witnesses, it's tough, and no forced entry doesn't help." I nodded, getting the picture. "If you remember anything or spot anything weird, reach out immediately." He handed me his card. "I'll check in about a week." When he left, the house felt different, like something had stained it. I lingered in the study for hours, staring at the open safe, the scattered papers, and a skewed photo of my dad. I straightened it, my thumb tracing the glass. In the days that followed, I kept watch. That's what prosecutors do. We examine piece by piece, building a case. Austin started taking calls outside, even when it was freezing. He'd pace the backyard, talking quickly and softly, running his fingers through his hair. When he came back in, he avoided my eyes. Evelyn began eating less. Plates with barely eaten food started appearing in the sink. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hair stayed unwashed. Every time I entered a room, she'd flinch, stiffening as if waiting for a blow. I didn't say a word. I just waited. 9 days after the break-in, I woke in the middle of the night to raised voices downstairs. I'd been sleeping fitfully, my mind replaying everything, imagining scenarios. I quietly crept up to the top of the stairs, merging with the shadows. I couldn't see the living room lit dimly by one lamp, but Austin's voice came through loud and clear. His whisper was harsh and anxious. "Get a grip. He doesn't know anything for sure. Keep this up and we're screwed." Evelyn, crying, said, "I can't do it anymore, Austin. He's my dad. I look at him and it's too much." A thud, like a fist hitting a wall, echoed. "We're in this together. You want to lose everything? Be left with nothing? On the streets?" Evelyn faintly suggested, "What if we just returned it? Said we stumbled upon it?" "Don't be ridiculous," Austin shot back. "It's gone. We can't change it. Just stay calm and keep quiet." Silence followed, broken only by Evelyn's muffled sobs. Austin spoke again, softer now, comforting. "I'll take care of it. It'll be okay. Just don't crumble now." Footsteps headed toward their room. In the shadowy stairwell, I stayed completely still, clutching the railing. A click as the lamp went out, plunging the house into silence. I stayed there, part of the darkness, feeling a fundamental shift within. The hurt I'd carried hardened into something solid and sharp. 32 years of locking up criminals, piecing together watertight cases, had taught me how to investigate, how to wait for the right moment. The legal system had its limitations, as Caldwell had said. But I had other methods, other options. I trudged back to my bedroom, but found sleep elusive. Instead, I parked myself by the window, watching the night slowly give way to dawn. The first morning light gently touched the bare branches of the oak tree in the backyard. Somewhere out there was my father's watch, a precious piece of our family's history, probably already turned into cash. They thought I was just an old man, sad, alone, and without power. They had it all wrong. That was their first mistake. I'd be patient. I'd watch and wait. I was carefully assembling every piece of evidence. When the time came, I'd be ready to act. I shifted from being the victim to preparing my case against my own family. Several nights slipped by, and sleep was a rare visitor. My bedroom door stayed slightly open, my ears tuned to every sound of the house. I'd lie in bed, fully dressed, watching the numbers on the digital clock change as the house gently creaked around me. A little after 2 a.m., I heard the front door quietly open. Moving swiftly but silently, I sidled to the window, making sure to stay out of the street lamp's glow. Austin stepped off the porch, dressed in dark clothes, carrying a small black briefcase I didn't recognize. He gave a quick glance left and right before heading to his car parked by the curb. My keys were waiting on the dresser. I snatched them up, threw on my dark jacket, and slipped out through the back, cutting through the kitchen and across the yard to the garage. Within 30 seconds of seeing Austin's taillights disappear around the corner, I was on the street. I kept a careful distance, widening the gap on empty roads and closing it near intersections. Old surveillance habits from working with detectives came back to me like second nature. Austin avoided the freeway, sticking to back roads heading east, which only confirmed my suspicions. He was heading towards the Willamette River, weaving through industrial areas where no one ventured at this hour. I switched off my headlights as he slowed down, guiding my way by moonlight and the occasional street lamp. My heart pounded, yet my grip on the steering wheel was rock steady. He finally stopped near the East Bank Esplanade at the bridge by the water's edge. I parked about 300 feet away, turned off the engine, and watched. Austin got out, briefcase in hand, scanning the empty street. Certain he was alone, he headed down to the river. I counted to 30, then followed, sticking to the shadows under the bridge. The chill of the concrete seeped through my skin as I hugged a pillar and watched him reach the water's edge. He paused, glanced over his shoulder twice, then hurled the briefcase far. The splash was loud in the surrounding quiet. Austin didn't linger. He sprinted back up the incline, stumbled, caught himself, and accelerated away in his car with a screech. I stayed hidden until his taillights vanished, then approached the bank where he had stood. The river here was sluggish, its waters cold and murky under the bridge. The briefcase bobbed some 15 feet out, caught among the rocks. Without hesitation, I waded in. The icy water hit me, soaking my pants and shoes. Despite slipping on the rocks, I pushed forward until I had the briefcase in hand. I dragged it ashore, water streaming off its leather. Despite the chill, my hand was steady as I undid the latch. Inside, neatly wrapped in plastic, my dad's Rolex, its second hand ticking smoothly. My grandfather's silver cigarette case gleaming in the moonlight, and stacks of $100 bills, all dry and safe. Everything Austin had taken. As I stood knee-deep in February's frigid water, holding the briefcase, a firm resolve took hold. Austin had stolen from me. With Detective Caldwell inching closer, he tried to ditch the evidence rather than get caught. But he'd messed up, and now I held the proof. My son-in-law was a thief, and my daughter had chosen to stand by him, betraying me. They joked about my age, pretending to care about my memory, thinking I wouldn't piece it all together. Man, they really had no idea what they were up against with me. I slogged back to the shore, my legs feeling like they weighed a ton, my shoes squelching with every step because they were filled with river water. That briefcase felt like it weighed 100 pounds, not because of what was inside, but because of what it symbolized: betrayal, the evidence of wrongdoing, just waiting to be brought to light. Back at my car, I set it down gently on the passenger seat. My soaking wet pants left a puddle on the floor, and even with the heater cranked up, I couldn't shake off the deep chill. But it wasn't just the river's cold. It was that eerie chill I got knowing Austin had taken off into the night after dumping the briefcase. I didn't rush home. Instead, I drove carefully, obeying every traffic sign like a saint. Inside my head, though, it was a mad dash, thinking things through, putting pieces together, constructing an airtight case like I'd done so many times before. Gather the evidence, find more clues, make the case airtight, then execute the plan perfectly. Austin probably felt pretty content, figuring he'd tossed away his problems. He'd crawl back into bed with my daughter, sleep like a baby, unaware of the storm brewing just for him. When I pulled into the garage, the house loomed dark and silent. I sat for a moment with the briefcase resting on my knees, letting all the emotions whirl around. It wasn't anger or sadness anymore, just a cold certainty. This wasn't about wrath any longer. It was about setting the record straight. It was about showing what it costs when you cross someone who's spent a lifetime locking up the bad guys. I stepped out of the car, closed the garage quietly, and reclaimed my father's old watch, making sure it was back in the right place. The next morning I headed downtown with the briefcase stashed in a duffel bag beside me. Leaving it at home would have been a rookie mistake. Austin might snoop, realize it was back in play. Safer to secure it first. My bank opened at 9, and with 4 decades of loyal patronage under my belt, the branch manager didn't blink twice when I asked for a safety deposit box. Just the usual formalities, ID checked, forms signed, done. I left with a tiny brass key tagged with the number 247. In the vault, I slid the briefcase into the narrow metal box, snapped a photo on my phone, gotta keep that evidence trail spotless, and locked it away. Now the evidence was secured, documented, dated, the whole shebang. Over the following days, I kicked off the next phase. Picked up a neat little security camera from an electronics store aimed at home surveillance. The box claimed it could be hidden practically anywhere and pick up the faintest whisper. Perfect. I stationed it in the hallway, perched on a bookshelf just right to watch everything between the living room and kitchen. I checked the Oregon laws. Turns out I could legally record inside my own house. Every night, I went through the footage on my laptop. Most of it was pretty dull. Austin chilling with the game on, Evelyn brewing coffee, chatter about groceries and bills. I skimmed through, jotting down timestamps in a legal pad dedicated to this mission. On the 3rd day, I hit the jackpot. There they were, Austin and Evelyn chatting quietly in the hallway. Austin sounded so full of himself. "Stop worrying," he insisted, confidence dripping from his voice. "I handled it. The old man's got zilch on us. We're in the clear." But Evelyn wasn't buying it. Her voice was tight with worry. "Are you sure? He's been watching us differently." Austin shot back. "He's got nothing. Just chill and play it cool." I replayed that part over and over, wrote down every single word, and filed it away in the case folder as Exhibit C. Made tons of copies, tucked them away in different spots, on my laptop, an external hard drive, and in secure cloud storage, keeping that evidence tight as a drum. But having evidence wasn't enough. I needed strategy. I called up some old prosecutor buddies, judges I'd known, attorneys I'd faced off against. I wasn't looking for some run-of-the-mill lawyer. No, I needed someone sharp in family law and estate matters, one who's got the smarts and the experience to navigate the tricky stuff. A retired judge put me on the path. "Rebecca Chan," he told me over the phone. "She's the one you want for those delicate family issues. Meticulous and on point. No room for emotions, just straight-up tactics. Is that what you're after? That's precisely what I'm looking for." So that afternoon, I picked up the phone and scheduled a meeting at her office for the following week. Leading up to it, I prepped like it was a big showdown in court. I compiled anything and everything related, neatly arranged in a leather portfolio. There was a printed timeline, Detective Caldwell's police report, bank documents showing I'd rented a safe deposit box, a USB with video footage and timestamps, and photos of what the briefcase held inside the vault. When I strolled into Rebecca Chan's office located on the 12th floor of a high-rise downtown, I clutched that portfolio the same way I used to haul around case files during my prosecutor days. She was younger than I had envisioned, probably in her early 40s, with neatly cut dark hair and an intense look behind her reading glasses. As she rose from her desk, she extended her hand for a handshake. "Mr. Bennett, take a seat." I sat down and started laying out the evidence in front of her, methodically and at my own pace, allowing each item to be its own advocate. I explained the theft, the police investigation that barely moved, the surveillance that caught Austin trying to get rid of evidence, the retrieval of the stolen items, and even shared a recorded talk that nailed their guilt. I made my case like I was back in the courtroom, presenting the facts, the order of events, the evidence, all leading to one conclusion. Rebecca spread the papers, watched the video twice on her screen, all while jotting notes with a red pen on a yellow legal pad. Observing her, I saw someone who prized precision and strategy above emotional strings. After about 20 minutes of silence filled with thought, she finally looked up. "This is incredibly thorough, Mr. Bennett. You've essentially constructed a prosecutor's case against your own kin." "Old habits," I shrugged. "Then you'll grasp what I'm about to propose," she continued, leaning back as her fingers touched together. "We have choices: pursue criminal theft charges, aim for a conviction, and go through a public trial. Your evidence is more than solid, but there's a different approach: civil recovery, will adjustments, and property eviction. Everything is on the level and legit in Oregon." She got up and mapped out her idea on a whiteboard. "First, we change your will. In Oregon, you can choose to disinherit freely. We leave them each a symbolic $1, signaling they weren't forgotten, but intentionally left out, avoiding any legal fights. Second," and she drew another marker line, "we file a civil lawsuit to reclaim what's rightfully yours. Your evidence easily satisfies the preponderance of the evidence standard. They'll face a public record of court judgment, everything clearly documented. Lastly, we evict them from your property. Without a lease, only a 90-day notice is required. No reasons needed." Rebecca turned back my way. By April, they'll be caught in legal turmoil on 3 fronts. They'll lose out on the inheritance, their place to live, and get stuck with a theft judgment on their record. All lawful, all solid, meant to drive home the consequences of their actions. For the first time since finding the safe cleaned out, I felt something like satisfaction. Not joyful, but calm and calculated. "Do you want public payback or private justice?" Rebecca asked. "I want them to feel they can't just take advantage of me because we're family," I replied. "I want it to stick." Rebecca nodded sharply, all business. "Then we'll move forward. I'll draft the new will this week, and we'll file the civil suit next week. The eviction notice goes out at the same time, and before they know it, it'll be too late to turn things around. When should we kick things off? Documents will be ready for your review in 3 days." She stood again, reaching out her hand. "Mr. Bennett, I've handled loads of family disputes, but you're the first one who's approached it like you're building a legal case instead of an emotional issue. It's refreshing." Her handshake was firm and confident. "I've spent 40 years in the courtroom," I told her. "I know how the law works. Now I want it to be on my side." She assured, "We'll make sure it's flawless." After that meeting, I left her office, took the elevator down, and hit the street with the portfolio feeling surprisingly light in my grip. Once I laid out the whole scheme, things clicked. The approach was spot on, and the schedule was set. I planned to wield the law like a sword, same as I'd always done to put the bad guys away. Austin and Evelyn thought they'd gotten off easy. They'd taken from me, lied to my face, and tried to erase the traces. They reckoned I was too old, too trusting, or maybe just too weak to strike back. But by April, it would hit them just how mistaken they'd been. 3 days later, the documents arrived. In my office, a manila folder spread open. I scanned the draft Will Rebecca had assembled. It was sharp, exact, with the punch we'd talked about. Every part was laid out perfectly, clear as day, with no wiggle room, no gaps they could slip through. My estate, one house valued at $650,000, investments rounding up to $400,000, and $150,000 in savings, would go to the Northwest Legal Aid Foundation, a nonprofit I'd been supporting for years, providing legal aid to families in need. Austin Carlton and Evelyn Bennett would each get a nominal buck, nothing more, clearly worded to show it wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate decision to keep them from any significant inheritance. I reviewed the language, cross-checking against my old law handbooks, making sure it all stood firm under Oregon statutes. Everything was right as rain. I rang up Rebecca to organize a meeting with the notary, and she got us slotted in for next week at the office of Patricia Morris down in town. After I hung up, I paused with the phone still in hand. This was it. This would mean my daughter gets nothing. The family line stops here, and I didn't waver for a second, just felt a clear certainty in my decision. Rebecca and I met up at a business center, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Patricia's office was straightforward and businesslike, with the usual bits like furniture and the notary tools, the seal and press. She checked my ID, going through the usual questions. Was this change really my decision? Yes. I was clear-headed and fully aware of how this shifted everything that came before. I signed where she showed me, and she firmly applied her seal. The sound of that seemed to echo a final decision. Then Rebecca laid out the eviction papers. We could legally evict them with a 90-day notice, since there was no official lease. Austin and I didn't sign anything, thinking he'd land a job quickly. That was 3 years ago. The notice was plain. Austin Carlton and Evelyn Bennett, you have 90 days to leave the place at 2847 Laurelhurst Avenue. I signed both copies. Later, at Rebecca's, she rolled out a timeline on her desk. Hold off on serving these, she advised. Let them discover the will first. We need them uneasy. Once they're reeling from losing the inheritance, hit them with eviction. Maximize the impact. You think like a prosecutor, I chuckled. She returned a slight smile and said, I think like someone who aims to win. Driving home, I kept the certified copies secured in my briefcase. The original will was stored in my bank's safe deposit, with the copies next to the valuables I'd recovered at home. Austin and Evelyn were chilling in the living room when I returned. I greeted them kindly and asked about their day. Austin mentioned a potential job opportunity, and I nodded, saying something encouraging. Evelyn glanced at me uneasily but stayed quiet. In the following days, I carried on the charade, chatting over breakfast, asking about Evelyn's freelance work, even complimenting a pasta dish Austin cooked for dinner. I saw Austin unwinding, letting his guard down a bit more each day. Then, a few nights later, Evelyn came into the room where I was working. Her face was troubled, and she stopped just behind Austin. Her voice was shaky. Dad, what are you doing? Don't do this to us. I turned, softened my tone, and said, Evelyn, try to see. This isn't out of spite. It's a lesson. She bit her lip, searching for words. But we're your family. We care about you. I gave a small nod. That's why it's crucial to understand that actions have repercussions. You can't just wrong someone and think everything will still be fine. Austin was boiling, clenching his fists. So, is this it? You're just going to turn your back on us? Holding his gaze steadily, I replied, I never said that. But things need to change, and it's time for us all to take ownership of our actions. His anger was obvious, but I saw a glint of something softer in his eyes. Evelyn stepped up, trying to ease the tension. Dad, please, let's work this out. For a moment, there was quiet, a calm before another storm. Okay, I said, breaking the silence. Let's talk. But you both need to really hear me. As we spoke, I could hear the faint sound of laughter from downstairs. The TV was still on. The world outside felt miles away. She was standing at the door, tears running down her face. "Dad, we can fix this. I'm sorry if you feel something's wrong." "It's not about what I feel, Evelyn. It's about what really happened, and now we deal with the fallout." I reached into my desk, took out 2 envelopes, and gave one to each. "These are 90-day eviction notices," I explained. "They're from Rebecca's law firm. You've got 90 days to find somewhere else. Better start now." Austin's hands shook as he opened his. "90 days, and you're booting us? Your own daughter? You've been living here without a proper lease. Oregon law lets me give 90 days notice, so that's what this is." "We'll challenge this," Austin said, his voice rising. "We'll go after the will. Claim you're not fit to make these decisions." I almost laughed. "I've got 3 clean health assessments from doctors this past month. Mentally, I'm as sharp as ever. I even had a notary validate when I signed the will. But go ahead, get a lawyer. You'll just be wasting money you're bound to need." Evelyn whispered, "How can you be so cold? I'm your daughter." I met her eyes. "That's why what you did is even worse." They retreated to their room, Austin throwing threats, while Evelyn wept. I returned to my desk, reading again. Upstairs, I could hear Austin ranting to Evelyn. Let him yell. It wouldn't change a thing. The law was on my side, and my case was too strong for their hollow threats to mean anything. I made the first move. They knew it was over, but they'd put up a fight. That was okay. Every legal try they'd make would drain their cash and only add proof to the mess they'd made once they inevitably lost, which I felt sure they would. I got back to my brief. Gradually, Austin's angry voice upstairs dwindled to nothing. By early May, about 3 weeks since handing them the eviction notices, a piece of certified mail came for me. Signing for it at the door, I took it to the kitchen, opened it with a steaming cup of coffee by my side. It was legal papers stating Austin had lawyered up. I scanned the petition. His lawyer, Gerald Hicks, seemed like a low-profile or not-so-seasoned one. Their grounds for fighting my will were typical, citing old age and claiming I could be influenced easily. Those arguments lacked backing, pure desperation, really. I phoned Rebecca immediately. Reading out parts of it, she reviewed the whole document over the call. Once done, she laughed. "This is their desperate shot. They're saying you aren't competent, so they'll probably want a competency test. But we anticipated this." "With those 3 medical tests," I recalled. "Exactly," she agreed. "We'll present all 3 with our response. This won't get far." The court date was scheduled for mid-May. Rebecca and I drove to the Multnomah County Courthouse, parked in their basement, and went up to the 4th floor by elevator. Austin stood there with his lawyer, Gerald Hicks, who looked uneasy, fidgeting in a poorly tailored brown suit. Evelyn didn't show up. Judge Sandra Kellerman was overseeing things. She looked to be about mid-50s and was wearing glasses that sat on her nose while she reviewed the documents from both sides before kicking off the hearing. Hicks presented his argument, and it wasn't strong. He didn't have any medical evidence or expert opinions, just theories about my age and the timing of my will change. He hinted that being 67 meant my decision-making might be in question. In his view, my altercation after a family spat made me irrational. Rebecca was on fire, tearing apart his claims step by step. She brought in reports from my GP, a neurologist and a psychiatrist, that all confirmed my mind was in tip-top shape. She also provided a notarized statement from the person who was present when I signed the will, confirming my clear state of mind. But that's not all. She even got 2 retired judges I'd once worked alongside to testify to my sharp intellect and professional capabilities. Judge Kellerman then turned her attention to me. "Mr. Bennett, could you explain why you made changes to your will?" Standing up, I answered, "Certainly, Your Honor. I discovered that a few family members living in my house they helped themselves to some of my prized items, so I decided if they were bold enough to steal, they definitely wouldn't be inheriting from me. I made this decision fully aware of the legal implications of cutting them out. In Oregon, I knew full well that when writing a will, you can choose anyone you like to be your beneficiaries. I did my homework before taking action. The judge smiled a little. "You certainly know Oregon law, Mr. Bennett," she remarked. "I spent 38 years as a prosecutor, Your Honor. The law is second nature to me," I replied. After about 20 minutes of questioning, Judge Kellerman concluded that I was fully competent. All my medical evaluations were flawless. Mr. Bennett knows exactly what he's doing and understands the consequences. Consequently, the petition was dismissed. Outside the courtroom, Austin looked visibly shaken. Any chance he had at his inheritance had disappeared. Then Rebecca handed him another set of documents in a folder. "Mr. Carlton, consider yourself served," she announced. As he opened the folder with shaky hands, he found a civil lawsuit staring back at him, demanding he return the stolen items. The lawsuit was thorough. It included everything: the briefcase, transcripts of conversations, a detective's report, photos of the items. His face drained of color completely. Over the next few weeks, Austin tried to put up a legal fight. He brought in Gerald Hicks for his civil case, but Hicks was struggling. It became glaringly obvious during discovery that Austin was in over his head financially. Bank accounts nearly empty, credit cards at their limits, debts piling up. He couldn't afford to sustain a prolonged legal fight. That's when Evelyn made her move. She told him plainly she wasn't going to stick around for the civil case. Rebecca's private investigator tipped me off initially, but Evelyn confessed during a brief, tense conversation. She wasn't willing to lie on the stand or act ignorant of the truth. Austin lashed out, "You're abandoning me after everything I've done for us." But she calmly shot back, "This was all for you, Austin. I just went along because I wasn't strong enough. I'm done." After that, their marriage practically crumbled. They still lived together, but emotionally they were miles apart, barely speaking. Rebecca kept me in the loop with regular updates. Every call painted a grim picture for Austin. His lawyer was ineffective. His money was drying up. His marriage was broken. And with an eviction looming in June, his time was running out. One evening, as I flipped through case files in my study, I reflected on Austin's failed petition, his incompetent legal representative, and his collapsing marriage. He'd thought he could pull a fast one on me just because of family connections, assuming I was too old and gullible to fight back. But he misjudged every step. I wasn't just resisting. I was systematically using my legal expertise to unravel his plans. This wasn't about revenge. It was a hard lesson in responsibility, and Austin was learning it the tough way. About 10 days before the eviction was supposed to happen, everything was falling into place just as planned. Early June brought clear skies, and soon enough, a knock at my door signaled what I had been anticipating. I opened the door to see a sharp-looking Deputy James Warren, clipboard in hand, with Rebecca standing beside him. "Mr. Bennett," he addressed me. Young and professional, he introduced himself. "I'm Deputy Warren from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, here to deliver the eviction order 2025 CV-007. I stepped aside, saying, "Please come in, Deputy." Austin Carlton and Evelyn Bennett, the ones named in the order, were upstairs. Even though Deputy Warren went over the procedure formally, I was already familiar with it. Austin and Evelyn needed to be out by 5 p.m. If not, their belongings would be stored at their expense, and they'd be legally barred from the property. Upstairs, I could hear them moving around, opening doors and talking in hushed tones. They knew this day was coming, yet it didn't seem like everything was packed. Evelyn came down first, her eyes red and face drained of color. Avoiding my eyes, she asked the deputy, "How much longer do we have?" He replied, "Until 5 p.m., ma'am." Around 9 a.m., a moving truck arrived, and the slow process of taking boxes downstairs began for Austin and Evelyn. Their belongings were mostly clothes, books, and a few pieces of small furniture. I stayed put in my office, door open, occasionally checking things out. I wasn't there to rub it in, just ensuring things went smoothly. Austin walked by my office a few times, shooting me glares but keeping quiet. He knew causing a scene would just complicate things. You could see how angry he was, but he kept it bottled up. Around 3 p.m., Evelyn appeared at my office door. She stood quietly until I lifted my head from my work. Her face streaked with tears. She struggled at first, but finally got the words out. "Dad, I just want to say I'm really sorry. It doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry." I stared at her for a moment. "Saying sorry can't undo what's done, Evelyn. It doesn't erase the betrayal. You made your choices, and now here we are." She responded, "I know, I'm your daughter. Does that mean nothing?" "It means your betrayal hurt more than if it were a stranger," I said. With a nod, she turned and walked away. By 4:30, they had loaded up the truck. Austin did a final sweep of the house with Deputy Warren. Everything was in order. They walked to the porch, keys in hand. With a brief pause, Austin relinquished the keys to the deputy, who then handed them to me. Without looking back, Austin headed for the truck, with Evelyn trailing, looking defeated. I stood at the window as the moving truck drove off. They'd found a modest apartment near Portland. Rebecca's investigator confirmed it. It was far from luxurious, a significant downgrade. I felt no regret. Tough lessons are often uncomfortable. Once they'd gone, I wandered the empty rooms, surprisingly tidy, probably Evelyn's doing. A locksmith was called, and within hours, the locks were changed. The next day, a security company installed a new alarm system. The house was mine again, and it would stay that way. That evening, I found myself alone in the living room for the first time in 3 years. The quiet was profound. No upstairs footsteps, no muffled TV, just tranquility. A glass of whiskey was poured, not out of celebration, but because something wrong had finally been made right. 2 weeks later, the civil trial started. Judge Kellerman was presiding again, remembering Austin's failed will contestation, which worked in our favor. Rebecca laid out a strong, clear case. Photos of the recovered items were displayed, and an audio recording of Austin's incriminating words, "I took care of it," was played. Detective Caldwell presented his initial theft report. I took the stand to recount the night I retrieved my belongings from the river. So, I was telling the court, around 2 in the morning, I heard a door creak open. I peeked outside, and there goes Austin Carlton, briefcase in hand. I trailed him discreetly to the Willamette River and watched as he lobbed the briefcase into the river. Once he walked away, I retrieved it myself. Inside were my dad's watch, a cigarette holder, and my cash. Everything reported as stolen. During cross-examination, Gerald Hicks tried to catch me off guard. "Didn't you trespass while following my client, Mr. Bennett?" he grilled. "Not at all," I responded coolly. "I stayed on public roads and snagged my stuff from a public river. No trespassing there." "But weren't you basically spying, invading his privacy?" He pushed further. "I was keeping an eye on someone I believed stole from me." "That's completely legal," I countered. Eventually he gave up. My past stint as a prosecutor meant I kept it sharp, only answering what was asked and not a word more. Then Judge Kellerman took a short break to mull over everything before returning with the verdict. She declared, "Austin Carlton is found responsible for theft by conversion. The evidence is plain as day, and the defense doesn't hold water. Judgment goes to the plaintiff for the return of the stolen assets, totaling $20,500 plus $12,000 for attorney fees. Altogether, $41,500, due in 90 days. Outside on the courthouse steps, Rebecca and I lingered. She was delighted. We won outright. "Feel vindicated?" she asked, beaming. "Justice was served," I replied. "That's enough for me." Meanwhile, Austin found himself cash-strapped and out of luck. Things were bleak for Austin. He was losing it all, his expected inheritance, his marriage, and now he had a $41,000 bill hanging over his head. But before Rebecca and I walked off in different directions, she brought up another point. "What about criminal charges?" she suggested. Detective Caldwell could reopen the case now that we had the civil verdict, and it was up to me to decide if that's a road I wanted to go down. I needed to mull it over. Pursuing criminal charges could mean jail time and a stained record for Austin. Everything he had left would be lost. While I told Rebecca I needed some time to think it over, deep down, I already knew my decision. A week or so post-civil trial, Rebecca gave me a call. Her voice had a hopeful tone as she said, "The civil judgment is all set. Now let's push for criminal charges. The DA is on board. We've got a solid felony theft case. Are you up for this?" "I'm set," I assured her. "What's our next move?" "Bring all your evidence to Detective Caldwell," she advised. "He'll compile a supplemental report to send to the district attorney. With the civil verdict, we've got a solid criminal case. As for Evelyn, she wasn't the one who stole or destroyed evidence, so it's Austin who faces charges alone." The very next day, I got to work organizing. I assembled everything into a tidy binder with dividers for sections: investigation, item recovery, civil case proceedings, and evidence. I included everything: the civil judgment, the initial police record, photos of the briefcase and its contents, transcripts from recorded conversations, and my recount of watching from the riverbank. I was laying it out like a prosecutor builds a case. 2 days later, I found myself seated across from Detective Caldwell in a busy precinct. The place buzzed with ringing phones and detectives tapping on keyboards. I laid out every detail for him as he jotted notes, asked for clarifications, and nodded along with me. "You've done a thorough job here, Mr. Bennett," he remarked. "You've practically done my legwork. After 38 years as a prosecutor, I can tell what's required." He sat back, thinking it over. "The property's value exceeds $1,000, so this falls under first-degree theft, a Class C felony. Maximum sentence 5 years. I'll recommend prosecution." "And how long before charges are filed?" I asked. "It needs a DA review and grand jury indictment, so roughly 3 weeks. I'll keep you updated." Those 3 weeks slipped by more easily than I had anticipated. I stayed occupied by volunteering at the legal clinic, savoring my porch coffee in the mornings, and getting lost in the books lining my study shelves in the evenings. I made sure not to get overly involved with the case, putting my faith in the system to handle it correctly. Detective Caldwell gave me a call in late July with some updates. The grand jury had issued an indictment, and they had sent out an arrest warrant that morning. Austin was picked up swiftly, but he managed to bail out shortly after. I appreciated the detective keeping me in the loop. Things started spiraling downward for Austin. His job put him on unpaid suspension while the legal matters played out. With no income, his little apartment became a burden. He hired a lawyer, Gerald Hicks, but Hicks reminded him that criminal charges play by different rules than civil ones. The burden of proof was higher, but given he was already found liable in civil court, his guilt was essentially documented. They held the preliminary hearing in early August, and I attended with Rebecca. The prosecutor, a clever young guy named David Chen, presented the evidence to the judge. Austin didn't really put up a fight. Hicks mainly argued technicalities, but that didn't change anything. The judge saw enough to set a trial date for late September. After the hearing, Hicks had a tough talk with Austin. Although I wasn't privy to that conversation, Rebecca's investigator later filled me in. Hicks was straightforward. Austin was going to lose at trial. The evidence was just too stacked against him. His best shot was taking a plea deal. Austin, utterly defeated and at his wits' end, agreed. Hicks hammered out a deal with Chen. Austin would plead guilty to first-degree theft in exchange for probation instead of jail time. The deal included 18 months of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, restitution, and a permanent felony on his record. The plea hearing took place in mid-August, and I showed up. Austin stood before Judge Kellerman, the same judge from the civil case, and owned up to his actions. Sworn in, he admitted to taking my belongings and trying to dispose of them. Judge Kellerman peered at Mr. Carlton and asked, "Mr. Carlton, you're admitting to first-degree theft, correct? Are you aware this results in a permanent felony on your record? Austin could barely respond, but eventually muttered, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge pressed on, reminding him of the facts. On about February 10th, 2025, he had unlawfully taken Victor Bennett's property with the intent to permanently keep it. Austin again quietly affirmed, "Yes, Your Honor." With a nod, the judge accepted the guilty plea and passed the sentence: 18 months of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and restitution as identified in the civil judgment. The judge also warned him about the repercussions of being a felon, like losing certain rights and possible job hurdles. "Do you understand?" "Yes, I do," Austin responded. After the courtroom proceedings, I caught sight of Austin one last time outside the courthouse, going over a stack of documents with Hicks on a concrete bench. He looked like he'd aged 2 decades in just 6 months, worn out and defeated, a mere shadow of his former self. His suit hung loosely, no longer fitting his now slender frame. Our eyes met briefly across the plaza. Gone was any anger or defiance, only sheer exhaustion remained. There was no sense of triumph for me, just a somber acknowledgement that justice had been appropriately served. The law, which I'd devoted my career to, had fulfilled its purpose. Austin was declared a felon, and for me, that sufficed. As I walked away from the courthouse, the afternoon sun warming my back, I knew it was over. With summer winding down, mornings were increasingly casting light through the oak trees by my house. I'd sit on the porch with my coffee and a physical newspaper in hand, just the way I liked it. Everything felt serene. A woman strolled by with her dog, and we exchanged friendly waves, simple joys, straightforward routines. This was my domain, my peace. I had the spare rooms in the house repainted, now sporting neutral tones, with fresh, clean walls removing any trace of those who had been there before. With the painting done, I walked through, ran my fingers over the new paint, and opened the empty closets. Those rooms felt reset, brighter, like a burden had been lifted off my shoulders. One morning, a letter redirected from Rebecca landed in my mailbox. The handwriting gave it away instantly. It was Evelyn's. Sitting down at my kitchen table, I unfolded a lengthy letter penned in neat handwriting. It was full of apologies and self-reflection. Evelyn explained that she and Austin had split up, and she was now living in a small apartment, managing several freelance gigs to make ends meet. She took ownership of her silence about the theft, admitting she should have put a stop to Austin's actions, or at least warned me. Towards the end, she penned, "You're my dad. I know I haven't earned forgiveness, but I'm reaching out all the same. Not for money or inheritance, just for a chance to one day be your daughter again." I went over the letter a few times, pondering over how I had raised her, supported her, and loved her for 37 years. But during Austin's deceit, her silence was deafening, prioritizing loyalty to him over honesty with me. The sting of that betrayal still lingered. I took a few days to figure out if I should respond. Ultimately, I let it be, not out of spite, but because everything that needed saying was already laid bare. Choices were made, and now we were all living with them. Maybe in time, there'd be space for a bit of reconnection. But for now, it wasn't the right moment. The letter went into a drawer, not torn up, just left to sit unanswered. Some doors, I think, remain shut until time decides to crack them open again. Early September rolled around, and I sat down with Rebecca for one final meeting to tie up all legal threads. She laid it all out. The civil judgment stood for 10 years, Austin's probation period was 18 months, and his criminal record wouldn't just vanish. My will, updated and sound. Everything was officially wrapped up. Rebecca asked, "Do you feel vindicated?" I took a minute to ponder her question. I'd say justice was met, but happiness isn't the word. It was never about joy for me. My daughter didn't support me. My son-in-law took advantage of me. They're answering for it now. That's all I aimed for. She nodded, grasping my point. Most folks would look for revenge, enjoy seeing them struggle, she noted. I shook my head slightly. I'm not most people. I wanted the legal system to hold up its end. Actions met with accountability. I grasped the wrongs done, but their damage was their own doing, not a goal for me. We closed on a professional note, shook hands, and our business dealings came to a proper close. Later that day, I headed to the bank. I went to my safety deposit box to retrieve my father's Rolex. Carefully cleaned and refurbished, the watch shone in its original glory. In the bank's private room, I held it in both hands. The watch represented more than wealth. It stood for our family's legacy, bridging generations, and stood for trust. Dad gave it to me after I passed the bar exam 4 decades back. He told me it symbolized time, which would test my principles, with the watch reminding me to hold steady. Austin aimed to rob more than just the watch. He wanted to tarnish its meaning. He didn't succeed. I strapped the watch onto my wrist. It felt just right, familiar and comforting. I returned home, parked the car, and walked inside. I lingered through each room, from the living room to the kitchen, the study, and upstairs to the bedrooms, just to absorb my reclaimed space. Everything was right where it belonged: my home, my belongings, and my peace. It's taken 67 years to learn this lesson deep down. Safeguard what's yours, not with walls or warfare, but through smart boundaries and fair consequences. And so, the story finds a peaceful landing, on a quiet morning in early September. I'm on my porch, coffee in hand, my father's watch on my wrist, and the newspaper by my side. My mind isn't tangled in thoughts of revenge or even-handedness anymore. Those chapters are behind me. Now I savor the simple things: my volunteer stint at the legal clinic later, the dinner I plan to cook, the book I'm devouring. Simple pleasures, invaluable pleasures. I check the time on the watch, watching the smooth sweep of the second hand. Dependable, precise, enduring, just like justice. A slight smile graces my lips. I sip my coffee, and I step into the day ahead.